Thank you so much for inviting me, and hello, everyone. It's a beautiful day. It's a wonderful day for breathing and for relaxing. Um, so I'm going to talk about that, breathing and relaxing. And I thought I would tell you a little bit about um, how I came into breathing and relaxing. I did my psychiatric training in London in the 1970s, and when I finished, I my immediate reaction, which was the result of uh, basically a chronic process of indoctrination in the medical model, was, is this all there is? Um, Psychiatry, as it was practiced then, and as I believe it is still practiced, was fairly redundant with regard to its understanding of mind-body relationships and what people really need. So I got interested in bioenergetics, which is a method of um, mind-body practice, which aims at facilitating emotional expression. And I did some training in bioenergetics in London with a woman called Gerda Boyesen. And the emphasis in bioenergetics was basically on breathing, actually breathing, releasing the breath. So you release vitality in the body and you release the capacity for emotional expression and connection. That was my first experience of really breathing properly. And at that time, one of the bioenergetics trainers, a delightful Welsh woman called Peg Nunnally, introduced me to Dr. Peter Nixon, who was a cardiologist at the Charing Cross Hospital in London. Charing Cross Hospital being a very prestigious teaching hospital. Peter Nixon had got interested in people with heart attacks, as he would as a cardiologist. And he had noticed that his heart attack patients inevitably were not breathing very well. And basically, he realized that they were all breathing in a very superficial way with the upper parts of their chest, and they were often breathing too rapidly. And Nixon eventually found that these people had acquired this pattern as a result, usually of chronic stress. But that interestingly, this pattern of breathing with the upper part of the chest rather than the abdomen also facilitated stress. It stimulated the sympathetic nervous system and so subjected you to greater levels of stress hormones and therefore the wear and tear that stress hormones produce in the body. So he was great on retraining his heart attack patients, usually men, to re-breathe and to breathe properly. And he would introduce them to proper breathing practices and to yoga. And some of his patients gave very impressive stories of how they had prevented subsequent heart attacks by breathing in the proper manner, which we'll talk about later, to head off angina, heart attacks, and other cardiac events. This was very interesting to me, and I became involved in looking at the phenomenon of chronic hyperventilation. And chronic hyperventilation is a very interesting phenomenon. They know quite a lot about it in parts of Europe, particularly Germany. But chronic habitual hyperventilation, which is where you're breathing a little bit too much and a little bit too superficially all the time, is practically unknown in Australia. And was certainly unknown when I came over here in 1980. And I've seen not much evidence since of it being a diagnosis that medics use at all. But it's an interesting phenomenon which has been very widely researched. And in fact, Peter Nixon found that this pattern of chronically overbreathing, superficial overbreathing, was also very common in chronic fatigue syndrome. Chronic habitual hyperventilation is simply that. It's breathing a little bit extra, maybe just one extra breath a minute, and breathing superficially with the top of the lungs. Now, people don't notice they're doing it, but some cardinal signs, the fact that you may be overbreathing, is a sensation that you can't get a deep enough breath, frequent sighing, yawning, or a feeling of tightness in the chest. All of these are symptoms of the fact that you're chronically overbreathing. And most people are chronically overbreathing because they are chronically stressed. When you're stressed, you're a bit anxious, you breathe a bit more. And normally, of course, when we go back to being relaxed, the breathing settles down. If you're chronically stressed, the breath keeps up at a slightly increased respiratory rate all of the time. And that has a number of consequences. The first consequence being that the carbon dioxide level in your blood drops. And that has incredible implications. When the carbon dioxide level in your blood drops, those with a chemical background will know that your blood starts to get too alkaline. And the body doesn't like an alkaline blood. Despite what you hear about from naturopaths, the body hates an alkaline blood. And the blood vessels tend to start to spasm. You get cold hands and feet as a result. You can get cardiac arrhythmias, even a heart attack. You get dizzy. Your immune system is affected. Mast cells in the immune system, which release histamine, become unstable. And so you're more allergic to sensitive or allergic reactions. So this is an incredibly important phenomenon. It's never diagnosed in my experience, or very rarely. And the only reliable way of diagnosing it is to actually measure the carbon dioxide that's being exhaled on the out breath. So I got a machine back in the 90s, maybe the 80s, I can't remember now, to measure people's carbon dioxide level. Let me show you that machine. It's called a capnometer. And it's commonly used in ambulances to measure the oxygen and the carbon dioxide level in acutely unwell patients. And it's very simple to use. Turn it on. You stick a little tube up your nose, and sooner or later, it'll read out what your carbon dioxide level is. Now, you probably can't see any of this very well. But the reading will come up there on the upper left hand. It's not reading the correct reading at the moment because I would normally need 2 or 3 minutes to settle down and with the tube stuck up my nose to measure my carbon dioxide level. So I started measuring carbon dioxide level on most of the people I saw and was surprised that so many people ran low carbon dioxide levels. And the only answer to running low carbon dioxide levels is to retrain your breathing. So I found that a lot of people were running a low carbon dioxide, including myself. I have a tendency to run a low carbon dioxide level. And one of the other consequences of running a low CO2 is a predisposition to asthma. So the consequences are widespread on the heart, on the lungs, irritable bowel. Some research has been done on irritable bowel and low carbon dioxide, the immune system, the brain, depression, anxiety, panic disorder particularly. Panics tend to come on when your carbon dioxide level has dropped too low or has gone up too high, interestingly enough. So that was the beginning of my making more concerted efforts to improve my own breathing and to really do breath re-education for some of my patients. And I would tell them to go and see a good yoga teacher to learn proper the proper yoga breath, which is slow abdominal breathing, and to maybe look at books like this book, The Hyperventilation Syndrome, by Diana Bradley, or my favorite book, Breathe Well, Be Well, by Robert Fried. Excellent, excellent book on the dangers of overbreathing and how to breathe properly. So that was Robert Fried, F-R-I-E-D, Breathe Well, Be Well. He wrote a learned book, The Psychology and Physiology of Breathing, with all the science behind this in it. These are quite old books now. I can't tell you when the last editions were. So the interesting thing about retraining one's breath is that it's difficult. Once the body has established a set point, like the carbon dioxide level in your blood, it fights like anything to maintain that level, even if that level is not good for you. It's like weight. Once you've established a particular weight, your body will defend that weight. You may be many kilos overweight, but your body will defend that weight by lowering your metabolic rate if you try and diet. That's why it's so hard to lose weight and keep it off. Your body doesn't want you to. And rebreathing, really learning to breathe in a better way is a real challenge, because often we've been doing it for years and our body is defending the physiological levels which that breathing has established in our body. And the breathing is the principal connection between mind and body. It's the main regulator of the messages that go from your brain to your body and from your body to your brain. We'll come on to that in a minute when we talk about the vagus, because that's the nerve that takes the messages to the breathing and takes the messages from the breathing back into the brain. My education about breathing took another step when in the 90s I met an Indian yogi. He was from Sri Lanka originally, Sri Balaratnam. He was a yoga teacher in Melbourne. When I met him, he was a chap in his 70s. And he taught breathing. And I'd never come across a teacher who basically just concentrated on teaching breathing. For most yoga teachers, they concentrate on the postures, and the breathing, the yogic breathing, pranayama as it's called, is a bit of an add-on at the end. So Sri Bala taught his own method, which he had refined from a teacher that he had in India. He called it vibrational breath therapy. Here's his little book on it, Vibrational Breath Therapy by Sri Balaratnam. I can give Peter some of these references afterwards. Sri Bala died a few years ago, but his was a remarkable story. In his early 60s, he'd been very unwell. His health, he had a number of health problems. In his early 60s, he discovered this breathing method. Basically, the breathing method was a method called balanced breathing. And it revolutionized his health. And I will do a little bit of balanced breathing with you in a few minutes. But it's a very, very simple method. It just involves breathing in to a certain count and out to a certain count. And it's called balanced breathing because you count in the same number as you count out. And that is extremely important. A number of methods are taught by yoga teachers and others where the count is different on the in and the out. And there are good reasons, as we shall see later when we talk about the Vegas, why that is not good. That's my view anyway. That's my view. And you must make up your own minds about that. But when we talk about the Vegas and breathing, you'll see why the count in and the count out is so important in improving the tone and the actions of your Vegas. So I got a lot out of Sri Bala's work. Not only did he teach balanced breathing, but he taught a way of saying the mantra Om, which really relies on practicing a form of breathing, which is quite strenuous actually. But once you're into it, it's very, very beneficial. Bala's method of balanced breathing, I took it very much on gospel that it was going to be good for me. When I started practicing it, I noticed some very, very interesting effects. I've had sinus problems all my life, and I've been a mouth breather much of my life. But after I'd done his practice for a few weeks, even though I was doing the breath through my mouth largely, my sinuses and my nasal passages cleared. This made a big impression on me because it wasn't like I was doing anything with my nose. I wasn't trying to breathe through my nose or whatever. I was just doing the balanced breath, and my breathing, my nasal passages cleared. I thought, wow, that's pretty nifty. The breathing does something. Then I noticed that my asthma had improved considerably, and I've relied on the method ever since to keep my asthma under control. Hasn't cured it. It certainly cleared my nose. Hasn't completely cleared my asthma. But boy, I'd hate to think what I would be like if I didn't do that balanced breathing every day. Let's do a little bit of balanced breathing before we go on and talk about the Vegas. Now, one of the great things I learned from Bala was that to do the balanced breathing, you must have a metronome. And of course, these days you can download a metronome app on your phone, no problem. So I got my little portable metronome. And you set it at 1 beat per second, 60 beats a minute. And you always breathe at that rate. So the balanced breath, as Bala taught it, is very simple. You start with breathing in for a count of 4. You make yourself comfortable, you have your feet on the floor, you sit up reasonably straight, you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 2, you breathe out for 4, you hold for a count of 2. In traditional yoga, in pranayama, the breath retention is seen as an important part of the breath cycle. It's like you're retaining the life force, because in the yoga tradition, it's like the breath has a subtle element in it, the prana, which is the life force, which you absorb better if you just hold the breath for a short while. So Bala would start people with 4 in, hold for 2, 4 out, hold for 2. Now, can you hear my metronome? So let's just do a little bit of 4-2 breathing, as it's called. 4 in, hold for 2, 4 out, hold for 2. And we'll just do that for a minute, starting now. In, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2. Good, good. Now, hopefully you didn't have too much trouble with that. One can have trouble with that pace of breathing. After all, we're reducing our breath rate to 6 breaths a minute. And our normal breath rate is 12 to 14 for men, 14 to 16 for women, around those averages. So already one is reducing one's breathing rate. And to reduce one's breathing rate to that level, you have to take a deeper breath. And to take a deeper breath, you have to use more of your lungs. Most of us do not use enough of our diaphragm in breathing in and breathing out. And so one has to learn a little bit about diaphragmatic breathing. And books such as the one I've shown you will give simple exercises to improve that. But very simply, one can put one's hands on the lower rib cage on either side, like this, and one can breathe into one's hands and really get the lower rib cage and diaphragm going. So the rib cage should come out, the belly should move forward. And another way of doing that is simply to lie on the floor, put a book on your stomach, just below the rib cage, make the book go up and down as you breathe in and out. The book comes up when you breathe in, the book goes down when you breathe out. Or simply put your hands below your ribs and feel the movement in your abdomen as your diaphragm moves up and down, opening up the lower lobes of your lungs. There's some videos on YouTube on breathing. Well, actually, there are lots. There are lots of clips on proper breathing on YouTube. There's a very good one. It's only 15 minutes by a chap called Max Strom, S-T-R-O-M, Max Strom. He goes around the world just teaching people to breathe. And it's extraordinary what happens when we breathe properly. And I think it was Max Strom who pointed out that the USA Veterans Administration, they now use yoga breathing, as a major modality in rehabilitating war veterans with PTSD. And interestingly, a chap called Richard Miller, who teaches a system called I-REST, small I, capital R-E-S-T. His yoga method, Yoga Nidra, the yoga of sleep, which is a profound relaxation method from the yoga pantheon, that's now accepted also by the US military as a major modality in PTSD rehabilitation. So it's extraordinary that these two yoga approaches are both now incorporated into PTSD rehabilitation. In fact, I believe they are much more effective than the traditional methods because they don't rely on talking. They rely on deep physiological change mediated through the vagus nerve. And so we come on to the vagus nerve. Peter, I saw you had a poster there on what the vagus nerve does. And I think there has been some discussion about that in a previous meeting. To briefly recap, the vagus nerve is this incredible nerve. And Peter's got the diagram behind him there. And I've got this old-fashioned picture of the vagus. It's called the vagus because it wanders. It's from the Latin vagare, I think. It's a wander. It wanders all over the body. It comes out of the skull. It's a tenth cranial nerve. Goes down the neck into the thoracic cavity, innervates the lungs, innervates the heart, then innervates the diaphragm, then it innervates all the guts, all the organs in the abdomen. And another branch of the so-called parasympathetic or relaxing side of the nervous system comes out of the tailbone and does the pelvic organs. And the vagus is this extraordinary nerve. It also sends a branch to the ear, interestingly enough. That branch is called the Alderman's branch. And it's called the Alderman's branch because in the old days, aldermans, counselors, when they would have a big council dinner and they would eat more than they could fully digest, would pull on their ears to facilitate the vagus nerve and its digestion of food. Because what the vagus does is it helps us to rest and regenerate. So it helps in the digestion of food. Clearly, it helps to rebalance the body. Rest and relax after the so-called ergotropic cycle of the body, the work cycle, where you use your sympathetic nervous system to do stuff, to focus your attention, etc., etc. Then you rest. The vagus takes over, helps the food to digest, settles the heart, settles the breathing, relaxes the mind, all is well. So, the vagus nerve is obviously super important. And until relatively recently, although we knew that, it wasn't possible to actually measure the activity of the vagus nerve. Now we have a method, which is a method which has been around for a long time, but has come along in leaps and bounds in the last, let's say, 15 to 20 years. And it is called heart rate variability. The vagus tends to slow the heart. The sympathetic nervous system, the adrenaline side of the nervous system, tends to speed the heart up. And they, between them, control the rhythm of the heart. And we usually assume that the heart rhythm is very regular. You take your pulse at the neck, feels pretty regular. But in fact, the heart rate is not regular. The interval between two heartbeats is always changing. And that's a sign of health. If the heart rate becomes very regular, you're in trouble. And you may be heading for a cardiac event of some sort. If those intervals keep varying, then that is a sign of health. And the more those intervals vary within certain limits, the healthier you are. And good heart rate variability correlates, apparently, with cardiac health, with immune health, with general health, and longevity. A lot of research has been done. whereas low heart rate correlates with chronic illness, a wide range of chronic illnesses, including fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, chronic immune problems, chronic uh, migraine problems, irritable bowel. The list is a very, very long one. Depression and anxiety, obviously. So it seems that improving heart rate variability is a good way of possibly improving health. And improving heart rate variability is done through vagal stimulation, through stimulating the vagus nerve. If your vagus nerve is functioning well, it improves heart rate variability. And we know that stimulating the vagus nerve is good because artificial stimulation, electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve, is used more and more in health complaints, particularly depression. Putting a little collar, electrical collar around the vagus nerve and stimulating it electrically is now a coming treatment for depression. And it's used in other conditions as well. But the best way to stimulate the vagus nerve is immediately through breathing. There are two broad ways. You can improve your mood by thinking good thoughts, nice thoughts, pleasant thoughts. That improves heart rate variability. Or you can do something about the breathing. That immediately improves heart rate variability. Or you can do both. And both methods are enshrined in the system that's used by the Heart Math Institute. The Heart Math Institute has been promoting heart rate variability for many years. And they have a little machine to measure your heart rate variability, so you can, for yourself, see what improves your heart rate variability by simply measuring it on this little machine, which is a standalone machine and tells you about your heart rate variability with a little light display, or you connect it to your computer and you get a lot of information, digital scores, graphs about your heart rate variability, and it's great fun. And you can see that just thinking nice thoughts and breathing in a proper, slow abdominal way will improve heart rate variability. The method of breathing to improve heart rate variability is very simple. And this has been known for a long time, and it matches Bala's teaching extremely well, is to do balanced breathing. And for most people, if they use a metronome, 1 beat per second, then somewhere between 5 in and 5 out and 8 in and 8 out will give them their maximum heart rate variability as measured on one of these little machines. So the machines are great because they will tell you exactly what breathing rhythm is right for you to absolutely improve your heart rate variability. Now, the breathing method for heart rate variability doesn't include the breath retention at either end. So it will be simply 4 in and 4 out. And if you find that very easy to do, you move to 5 in and 5 out. And if you find that easy to do, you go to 6 in and 6 out. And if you find that easy to do, you go to 7 in and 7 out. And 8 in and 8 out, and so on and so forth. Somewhere along that spectrum, you will get a maximum score on your little heart math machine for your heart rate variability, and that'll be the right rhythm for you. For me, it's 6 in and 6 out. Gives me maximum heart rate variability. But it may be different for you. So ever since I learned Bala's method, I do it every day. I know it's doing me good. But nowadays, I don't do the breath retention. So I just do 6 in and 6 out for about 40 minutes every day. Now you may say, how am I going to set aside 40 minutes every day to do breath practice? Well, the only way I can do it is by doing it while I watch the TV. So you select a nice program like Gardening Australia or Australian Story or something who's not going to sort of perturb your nervous system, and you relax and you have the metronome with you and you do the breath for 40 minutes or so. Sometimes I do an hour because it's a very pleasurable thing to do and you feel very good. You don't have to watch the TV, of course. You can do it at any time within reason. And I found over the years that the effects of balanced breath really kick in after 20 minutes. For example, if you're feeling very anxious, you've got to do the balanced breathing for over 20 minutes. And with anxiety, for me, the positive effects are really calming me, really balancing me out, kick in after about 40 minutes. Sounds a lot, but boy, it's worth it. So this is heart rate variability in action. And what seems to be happening is that when you breathe in this balanced way, and by the way, a refinement is if I'm doing 6 in and 6 out, I feel my breath going into the lower lobes for the count of 3, the middle lobes for the count of 2, and the upper lobe for the count of 1. And when I breathe out, first the air goes out from the lower lungs to the count of 3, the middle lung, count of 2, top of the lungs, the count of 1. So I'm taking a proper breath. And what seems to happen is that the vagus is recording what the diaphragm is doing and what the lungs are doing, but the diaphragm particularly. And when it senses that the diaphragm is going in and out in this nice, relaxed, deep fashion, it sends signals back to the amygdala in the brain, the fear center, the fight-flight center, saying, all is well. The breathing's very relaxed and easy, so everything must be fine. So, turn off the stress response. This is what seems to happen. And then the brain says, oh, yes, great. And sends signals back down to the breathing saying, keep up the good work. So it's, as they call it, a virtuous circle. And I think it's the most important thing anybody can do for their health, bar none. Not only are you doing this breathing, which will improve your heart rate variability, which will improve your immune system, your brain, your heart, and your lungs, you're massaging all your internal organs as well. So it's incredibly good for irritable bowel and things like that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Basically, breathing is a real key to mind-body harmony. Our modern concepts about the vagus nerve and breathing completely confirm the traditional yogic wisdom. And I'm all for it.